Hey guys, it's Jeff from Fresh Your Luck, and while I have a sweet beginning for you with this video, I also have a sweet ending, because we're making a dessert today. That's correct, and this dessert is the perfect dessert for any fall time of year where it's like a Thanksgiving type dessert, something that's gonna be really decadent and really sugary and really mapley and just brown buttery bourbony. And here we go, guys. It's so easy, so simple. We're making a bread pudding with bourbon whiskey sauce at the end. Is a bourbon whiskey sauce a double entendre?
Not double entendre, it's redundant.
Okay, well, we're making a bread pudding with a redundant whiskey sauce. Let's get going right in the Instant Pot. So the first step to making bread pudding is to use plenty of carbohydrates. Yes, guys, bread. And I am using my favorite type of bread for a bread pudding, butter croissants from the Costco. Okay, guys, you get 12 of these huge things for like $6 there. Look at that, double layer, there's 12 of them. We're only gonna use 6 for this recipe, so you take the other ones and do whatever you want with them. You can also use a brioche or a challah bread, which is like a Jewish bread that's really soft and eggy and sweet and fantastic. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take 6 of these wonderful croissants and then cut it up into nice sized cubes, kind of just like this, and let's just set that aside. So now let's go to the Instant Pot and add in 2 tablespoons or 1/4 of a stick of salted butter. We're gonna come down to the pot, we're going to hit the saute function, and we're going to adjust it so it's on the less or low setting. And once our butter is melted in the pot, we're gonna add in 2 cups of milk, whole milk. I'm gonna also add in 2 tablespoons and 2 teaspoons of white granulated sugar, as well as 2 tablespoons and 2 teaspoons of a light brown sugar. And then finish that off with 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And then just stir it around on low heat until all the sugar's dissolved and all the butter is melded with the milk. We don't even really want to bring this to a bubble. We just want to make sure it's just a little bit warmed up. And then after about a minute or so, it should be. So we're going to turn the heat off in the pot immediately. Okay, hit keep warm cancel. And let's just remove our liner pot from the heat and let it sit on like a cutting board or something like that to cool down. And just give it a stir for a few more seconds while it's sitting there. Make sure everything gets nice and combined. And then just let it sit there for about 15 minutes until it cools down. And then we're going to add in some eggs. You can also pop this in the refrigerator to speed up the cooling process if you have the room in your fridge, of course. Now while the milk mixture is cooling down, let's take 3 eggs and then crack them into a bowl, and then let's give them a good whisk up until they're nice and beaten. Okay, great. Now let's just make sure that all of our milk is completely cooled before we add our eggs into it. Otherwise, they'll start to cook in there, and we absolutely don't want that to happen. So make sure that the milk mixture is nice and cool to the taste right before we add our eggs. And now that our milk is cooled down, we're going to add our eggs right into it and then just mix it together. And I find that a whisk works best. And once I'm done whisking, I'm going to add in 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground cinnamon and 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. And then just give that all a final whisk so everything is nice and combined. Perfection. All right, now we're going to take this beautiful custard we've now made and we're going to pour it all over our bread. All right, and here we go. All over our bread. Whoa. Get it all nice and soppy. Okay? And now let's make sure that all of our bread is combined up with all of our custard. And you can just take some nice clean hands and then just make sure all of our bread is nice and covered and coated with an amazing, beautiful egg custard. And then of course, let's wash our hands after we're done with this. All right, now we're gonna cover our bowl that all our egg custardy bread is soaked in, and we're gonna pop it in the fridge for about an hour until it's nice and cool. And there you go, right in the fridge, and we'll be back in an hour. And then let's take our Instant Pot that we cooked our milk mixture in, and let's also rinse and clean that out. Right, and then just dry it out when it's all nice and cleaned, and then we're going to return it to our Instant Pot. We'll come back to you in a little bit. Alright, so just before we're about to take our custard-soaked bread out of the refrigerator, let's grease a 6-cup Bundt pan. I will link this in the recipe. And then just make sure we butter all of the pan, all of the sides, including the middle section here, because sometimes people forget about doing that, and it's important because everything will stick to it if it doesn't. You know, so make sure we get all of the pan nice and greased. Okay, perfect. Now let's get our bread and stuff it into the pan. Alright, here we go. Take it out of there. And then we're going to lift this off and then take our delicious bread, just give it one more mix, and then stuff it right into our Bundt pan by hand. So I'm going to take some of the bread and I'm just going to pack it inside of our Bundt pan. And just do it until we've gotten all of the bread transferred over and mixed together. And then there we go. Let's just make sure everything is sort of evenly distributed throughout. Don't press down too hard. It's going to be just the right amount in there for this 6-cup Bundt pan. Just make sure everything is kind of nice and even, like I said. All right, now let's top this off with some tin foil. And I'm actually gonna spray my foil with a little bit of Pam, just because when it touches this, I don't want it to stick to it. So I'm gonna put it right on top, and then just make sure we get it all covered up. And the main reason we really want to cover it with tin foil is so when we put it in the Instant Pot, the moisture from the top of the pot doesn't drip on our bread pudding and make it a little more soggy. So what we want to do now is down in the center of the Bundt pan, poke a little bit of a hole, because this is going to allow for air to pass through when we put it in the pot, the steam. It'll help it go through the entire thing. That's why the Bundt pan is so good for these things. It cooks things so much more evenly and perfectly. Now let's go to our Instant Pot and put our trivet in there and leave the handles up, and then pour in 1.5 cups of water. Let's now carefully rest our Bundt pan on top of the trivet in the Instant Pots, and it'll fit absolutely perfectly. All right, now let's put the lid on top. Secure it, make sure it's in sealing position, and then we're gonna hit manual or pressure cook depending on your model, and then we want to adjust the time so we're at 25 minutes on high pressure. 25 minutes. And when we have less than 10 minutes of cooking time to go, let's preheat our oven to 400 degrees. All right, let's quick release. All right, the pin is dropped, so the lid comes off, and look at how beautiful. Oh, actually, just kidding, you can't even see it yet, but we'll just leave that there for a few seconds. So while the pan is cooling in the pot for a second, let's go over here and take this one egg, crack it into a bowl, and then whisk it up. Great. Perfect. Now leave that aside. Let's now carefully transfer our Bundt pan to a cooling station. Okay, success. And now let's just remove our foil, and well, there's our bread pudding. Phenomenal. All right, let's just let it sit there for a few seconds. In the meanwhile, let's take all the water out of the Instant Pot and then return the pan to the Instant Pot. All right, let's come down here, hit keep warm cancel, and then hit the saute function and adjust it so we're on the more or the high setting. Now I want to add in 1 stick of an unsalted butter and let that melt. And once the stick of butter is melted and begins to bubble, we're going to add in 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. I'm using a sea salt, but you can use any kind of salt. And 3/4 of a cup of white sugar. And now mix everything together and let it simmer together. I also want to add in 1 tablespoon of maple syrup. And then stir that around with everything else. Everything is going to begin to get really thick and syrupy now. It's exactly how we want the sauce to be. And as you stir, there's still going to be elements of sugar in there, which is perfect because we're making a bourbon glaze. So it's almost like an icing of bourbon. It's phenomenal. So just keep stirring and then bring it to a slight bubble. And don't let it bubble too long. Then we're going to add our egg in there. And then let's stir our egg in, and the consistency and the texture is going to change magically. And once our egg is added into the sauce and mixed around, it's going to look a little bit like this, which is exactly how we want it. And we want to turn the heat on the pot off. Alright, keep warm cancel. And now let's transfer our inner pot to a cooling area. And as the bubbles continue to die down, just give everything a good stir in the pot. It smells incredible. And after we've had a few moments of the bubbles dying down, we're going to add in 1/4 of a cup of bourbon or whiskey. And then just mix that up with everything else. Hear that little bit of a sizzle going on in there? This is our final step. Just keep it stirring up. You can get that real strong initial smell of the bourbon burning off a little bit from when you first pour it in, and it smells incredible, and this sauce is to die for. Trust me on that. And you might be asking, why do we add eggs? Well, I'll tell you why. The eggs are actually going to set this apart from any typical whiskey sauce because the eggs provide a little bit of a slight crispy crunch to them in there, and it almost creates this amazing crunchy like flakiness to the sauce itself. You're going to love it, I promise. If you don't want the eggs in there, you don't really want to try it out, leave them out. Not a big deal at all. I really think it sets it apart from any other whiskey sauce. And it really makes the texture look really fun and beautiful. All right, so now let's go back to our bread pudding, which is nice and cooled. I'm gonna take my bread pudding and then I'm going to flip it upside down so it's unmolded onto a foil-lined baking sheet that I'm gonna spray with some cooking spray. All right, and then just give it some taps to make sure everything comes out nice and easy. And voila, bread pudding. All right, we're gonna pop this in the oven for about 5 minutes. Keep an eye on it until it just gets slightly browned and a little toasted. Ooh, that looks pretty. All right, we'll see you in a few minutes, bread pudding. All right, and after a few minutes, let's check on our bread pudding, and oh yeah, that's looking perfect. Let's get it out of there. Oh, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. All right, let's let it sit there for a few seconds and then transfer it to a serving plate. And there we have it, our beautiful bread pudding transferred to a plate. It'll just slide right off that tin foil right onto it, so easy. All right, guys, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this beautiful whiskey sauce and layer it all over our delicious bread pudding in a Bundt. So now I'm going to take the whiskey sauce and I'm just going to basically cascade it over the Bundt and just kind of paste it over it like this, almost like an icing. And we're just gonna get it all over and let it drip down the sides and everything, and oh, perfection. Okay, I love it. I love how the eggs creates this texture of flakiness throughout the sauce. And again, if you don't want to put them in there, don't put them in there. No big deal at all. But it smells divine and it's looking wonderful. All right, perfect. There we go. There it is. All right, guys, let's cut into this beautiful bread pudding. All right, look at that. And then another piece right here. Perfect. And, oh, gorgeous. All right, let's put this on a plate. And there's our beautifully sliced and plated bread pudding. Look at how incredibly moist and gorgeous that looks. Okay, well, it's time to have some of this bread pudding and reward myself here. Let's go. Here we go. You cannot ask for a better bread pudding than this one right here. Oh my gosh, the flavor. Decadent. Those amazing flaky croissants with that egg custard all sopped into it, like absorbed like a sponge. And then that amazing whiskey sauce to counter everything off. It's so sweet. Each bite, it's almost like you taste a little bite of sugar in there too, with some amazing crispy egg flakes. It almost tastes like an incredibly decadent French toast casserole, if you will. It's delicious. And serve it with some ice cream too. I mean, why not? I mean, ice cream goes with this like Bert goes to Ernie, you know what I'm saying? It's just an unbelievably decadent, wonderful dish. And this is gonna be wonderful at your Thanksgiving table. Not only is it a great dessert to end any meal, but it's also a great breakfast to start any day. I'd eat this any time of day. Guys, if you enjoy these easy to follow videos that have written recipes that go along with each one, go to pressureluckcooking.com, hover over any photo on the recipe, and then you can see a little save button. Save it to any board on Pinterest. You can pin it to any board. Go to facebook.com/pressureluckcooking and like that page. You'll get updates to all new recipes, Facebook Live events. Anytime I release any tips, you'll be notified. At Pressure Luck is my Twitter handle, so follow me there. Also, you'll learn about anything new that drops. Subscribe to me on YouTube, Instagram, all that stuff. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I hope you enjoy this beautiful bread pudding as much as I do. Just make sure when you're done eating it, you do the dishes, because at least you'll have some form of exercise afterwards. You know what I'm saying?